have to say I was here last year, and it was kind of, it was inspiring, but it was kind of a staid crowd. I am delighted to hear the raucous enthusiasm for what we're doing. Yeah, so that's great. So
you missed the horns this morning.
did we? So the second thing is, I'm delighted to see so many of my friends here. Maybe that means I'm back in the fold. Maybe it means I get out more. Or maybe that means that there are more of us who are just throwing our hats in together and huddling together for warmth. But whatever it is, this is a great event, and I'm so happy to see each one of you. So what I'm going to do as the moderator is I have a lovely panel here, and I'm going to introduce them in a second. I had a choice here. I thought I'd do a 2-hour monologue on my honors thesis that was the structural and mechanical analysis of the mesoglea of sea anemones. Oh, I know. Seriously. Or we'd talk about courage, and I'll ask some questions of these incredibly impressive folks, but we'll leave a fair amount of time at the end for your questions, because now that you're all energized, you're not going to be shy about asking questions. So courage is perhaps my favorite leadership attribute. Particularly in the national security arena, we know a lot about physical courage and the whole idea of first in, last out. We get that. But I'm talking about moral courage. And moral courage is especially important for us because of the special trust we hold with the American people. But even more than that, as women, I think we manifest courage differently in the workplace. And it's just as valuable. Sometimes it gets mistaken for other things. You know, courage in leadership is sometimes speaking up, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's holding fast, and sometimes it's giving in. Sometimes it's allowing someone to do something entirely differently from how you would do it and standing behind them anyway. To me, courage comes from being true, right? At the end of the day, are you going to be who you are? And when you don't know what else to draw on that. When you don't know if you can be courageous, be who you are, and that will be enough. And if you're who you are every single day, then people will learn to count on that from you. I think in the intelligence business, sometimes courage is just simply being able to say A or B. You know, when a decision is placed in front, what should we do, A or B? And think about, in national security, we have to do that when we know that the next day we could be wrong, and yet someone still requires us to make that call of what should we do, right? So we're going to talk about courage with the panelists here and what it means to them and some examples. First, let me introduce Kim Peretti, who's the director and co-leader of cybercrime practice and forensic services. Total digression here. I've got 2 cyber people here, and if you recall, last year I used to be the deputy chief of the Information Operations Center, so you know it's the cyber people taking over the world. And you should be scared of this because we can get anywhere. So Kim is a former senior litigator for Department of Justice's Computer Crime and Intellectual Property Section. She serves a wide range of clients in matters of cyber intrusions, cyber investigations, cyber security, financial crime, fraud, regulation payment systems, compliance, risk mitigation, economic espionage, and intellectual property theft. She'll be a great partner with Debbie. And Kim is a board advisor to the Financial Services Information and Sharing Advisory Center. Next, there's Debora Plunkett, who we have actually shared careers with for many years and never met each other, so thank you for hosting this event so we could finally get to know each other. Debbie is the director of the Information Assurance Directorate in the National Security Agency. The IAD is the focal point for cybersecurity, cryptography, and information systems security for all national security systems. With over 25 years at the agency, Debbie has served in a number of leadership and operational roles, both in the signals intelligence and information assurance missions. That means she can play offense and defense. Yeah, I know. She also served as the director for the National Security Council, where she helped shape the national policy on critical infrastructure protection and cybersecurity. And in 2007, Debbie was awarded the rank of Meritorious Executive in the Senior Cryptologic Executive Service by the President of the United States. And finally, Stu Shea, who I had the great delight of having dinner with last night, was just recently appointed Chief Operations Officer at SAIC. Prior to that, he served as the President's president of SAIC's Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance Group. Stu oversees 41,000 employees who support customers across the full spectrum of national security programs. He's the founder, CEO, and board chairman for the U.S. Geospatial Intelligence Foundation and the highly acclaimed GeoInt Symposium. And what I learned about Stu is, as moms, I don't think there's anyone in the universe that loves her children more than I do. Until I met Stu, and he may love his seriously. You know, we almost had a kid throwdown last night.
Yeah, we did. Who got the pictures out first?
Inclination was that it was an innate attribute, because I thought back over my life and how even in kindergarten, when I remember the teacher bringing in a motorcycle for everyone to get on, and a little boy got on, I was like, I want to get on that, and went up and talked to the teacher and stood up, and I want to be the person on the motorcycle, and always being very, interested and aggressive in trying to stand ground, and especially when it came to difficult decisions, and the Girl Scouts, working with the other Girl Scouts and taking a leadership role and showing these innate attributes of courage. But that didn't necessarily transform in any way, shape, or form into my professional life. And I've looked over, and I'm so happy to be a participant today, because it's sort of brought me, thinking about the past 15 years and everything I've encountered along the way, and all the problems I had earlier on, and how I've had to learn from them with the support of a wonderful husband of, why didn't you act like that when you saw that happening, and really helping me through a lot of situations. And I would have to say, in my professional life, courage has very much been an acquired knowledge.
Debbie?
Wow.
I know. It's all, I will not make you all follow the other one each time. I'll give each person a chance to answer first.
I want to go on the record by starting out by saying each of my colleagues were smart enough to bring notes. I'm not sure if that was courage or not, that I don't have any. So we will see here in a minute where that goes. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think each of us has the capability to exhibit courage. And I think we can do it. We learn to do it. And the reason I can say that is because I have had the great opportunity to nurture different individuals throughout their working career who may have started out not feeling so courageous, but were able to draw on the experiences of others and the experiences that they've had. And all of a sudden, you see somebody pop up and say something, you think, wow, that took courage. And it might have been someone who may not have even thought that they had it. I think you can absolutely grow in your use of and your strength in that way. And we all have a little bit of it to start, I'm convinced. Mm-hmm. And I think the way you nurture and use it and the tools you get along the way will help you to do that.
Awesome. All right, Stu, bring us home.
I think you always see, when you see courage, you know what it is. When you don't see it, you know what it isn't. And so right before I came here, I looked up courage in the dictionary, right?
So did I.
The mental.
Did you say such a guy? No.
This is a guy thing. No, I'm gonna come back on this. I'm gonna reinforce my views, right? It is the mental or moral strength to venture, persevere, resist opposition, and withstand danger, fear, or potential for hardship. It is the mental, spirit, resolution, and tenacity to accomplish a goal or advance a cause. You know what I think courage is? I think courage is the currency of leadership. I think that you can be thrust into it, born into it, step into it, or have it thrust upon you. And I think it is both an innate thing that you have, and it's a learned skill, and I think it's all situational. I don't think anybody that decides they're going to have the courage to jump on a hand grenade said, I was born with that, or I learned how to do that. It is something that just happens because it brings together all the different experiences you have in life. And in retrospect, we look at people and say, they had courage, or they didn't. And so I wouldn't worry so much about whether it's born or learned. Just accept it for what it is.
I was talking to Madeleine Albright. Just as you were talking, Stu, I thought about this. I was talking to Madeleine Albright the other day. Such a name dropper. I didn't mean that.
Yeah.
My pal. And we were talking about the same thing. We were talking about women and the ability to speak up and take a room. Can you take a room when it's not given? She told a story about, it was heartrending. And she's a pistol. She's no bigger than a minute. I mean, she's teeny but formidable woman. And she described the first time when she went to the United Nations. And she walked in the room and She faced some pretty fierce opposition when she was named to the position, but she took it and she went in and she saw these people standing in the Great Hall of the United Nations, and she was wondering, they were all talking to each other, what she was going to do, were people going to like her, what she was going to say, what she's doing. She said, and then she saw her seat and it said United States. And she decided that she better represent the United States, not deal with her own insecurities. And I think there's an element of that too, is understanding the position you hold and what that position demands that is different from what you might prefer. I'm a raging introvert. My position demands that I step out and do it. So I think there's an element of, in listening to you, it doesn't quite matter. Sometimes it's just the currency of leadership and it's what you must do. Okay, so let's get down. That was all nice and theoretical. So, yeah.
Good warm-up.
Yeah, exactly. I got to ease them into this. Stu, what's the toughest decision you've ever had to make in a work setting?
I was a leader of an organization, and we had a big competition coming up, and there were 4 companies that were all vying for the prime position. And it would have been very easy to succumb to the pressure and just be a subcontractor. And I put almost the entire company at risk by selecting a prime position. My boss told me that if I made that decision and failed, I was going to be fired. I accepted that responsibility. I knew that I had 300 employees that I had to worry about and all their families. And I went around a room and I asked about 25 people in a room, what do you think I should do? And universally, every single person around the room said, don't prime this, you need to sub. And it got to the very last person, a woman, and she said to me, and I quote, I think you should choose whatever you believe is right and we will all follow. And I said, wow. And what I knew to be right was I knew we could win, I knew we could do this, and I knew the people would trust me, and I made that decision. My boss then threatened to fire me because I made the wrong decision because he was vying for promotion. We won. And it was the largest support contract awarded for NGA, and the company that got the contract still has it today.
Wow. No notes, girl.
Oh, okay, wow. So I'm actually going to use one that's a little bit of home and a little bit of work. Mother of 2, college graduate on Saturday, by the way, our daughter.
Congratulations.
About 7 years ago, I was asked to sit on what's called a personnel review board. It's the senior personnel review board at NSA responsible for making decisions and recommendations regarding the senior executive population, and I was asked to serve as a minority rep. And what that means for those of you who aren't in that space is that there are requirements to have a minority and a female rep on established boards, and in the absence of one of those representatives, the boards can't meet. And so we were approaching a period where our board was going to have to meet for very long periods of time because we were talking about the end-of-year compensation process. And our daughter was playing volleyball. And this board, because all of us were in more than full-time day jobs, our board had made a decision that we needed to meet after hours. And so I was in a bit of a quandary because I didn't want to miss volleyball, but I knew I had a responsibility to this board. And so I took what certainly felt like a big risk at that time, given the others who were on the board who were fairly more senior than I was at the time. And I shared with that board. I said, look, here's the deal. Here's my schedule. Here's when I can be there and here's where I can't, because I need to make volleyball games. And there was quiet around the room for a minute. And then the board said, okay, well, let's move with the schedule. And I will tell you, to this day, members of that board who are no longer even on the board will come up to me and say, how's Whitney doing? How'd she do? During that entire semester for her in school when volleyball was going on, we'd start the board with, did we win last night? How did we do? And so for me, that wasn't a huge, big decision from a work perspective, and I've had to make many of those. But for me, that was a personal choice. to make a decision that I thought was really important. And I was able to balance. So what did that mean? That meant that I was there on Saturdays and Sundays. The board had to meet. They worked around my schedule. I was there on the nights that we weren't in volleyball, or we were in a board meeting. And so everybody accommodated and adjusted, and it was a win-win. So.
I think what's interesting about what Stu and Debbie said is sometimes there people are just waiting for you to make the big decision. When you're in it, you feel really alone. And the whole silence and the pressure of a bureaucracy and how we've always done things kind of is this force acting on you, and you think that you're the only one that can imagine doing it differently. When you speak up, you find exactly what you did, that everyone's like, oh my God, thank goodness. And all of a sudden they can do it.
Well, they remember, I'm a mother too.
I'm a mother too. Or it's okay.
I'm a father too, I know.
Or that schedule did not come down on stone tablets, and it is in our control, and we can do it differently. And when you talk about things that, why sometimes women have a hard time advancing to the highest levels of leadership, and there's lots of data on this, and no one really totally gets why. Part of it is because we're afraid to imagine that the work can be done differently. The meetings can be held on a different schedule. Executive assistants could actually share a job rather than having to give up everything so they can work 20-hour days. So to me, that kind of courageous act, while you feel like you're alone when you're in the middle of it, like the woman who spoke to you and the people that asked about the game, they're saying, thank God that someone did it. So we talked big acts. Now let's talk about like just simple acts of courage. Like I say, speaking up in a meeting, just something small that might send a message. Got any ideas?
Yeah, I have a lot of ideas along the lines. I think this example is going to be along what has been the toughest thing for me to be courageous about is when I encounter someone who 100% doesn't have respect for women, and it's blatant. And all of a sudden, I'm like, wait, no, you have to have respect for me. I'm a professional. I got where I'm at, and it's taken me many years. It sort of undercuts you, it undermines you. And I have an example. I was at the Department of Justice and had been working on an investigation for several years, and it involved a company that was involved in money laundering, and a CEO that it appeared was very complicit in this activity, and we had intended, and the facts and the evidence were developing such that we were able to indict him. And this is after several years of an investigation, and we gave a friendly call in after the indictment came down to the general counsel of the company and asked who outside counsel is. We needed to speak with him, and we got outside counsel on the phone to and I was so proud of this. I mean, we really worked hard, and I felt like, talk about backing from the Department of Justice, how critically important this was from a number of reasons, and it was sort of a benchmark prosecution. So my confidence was high. I was just, on fire after several years of all this. And put the phone call in, the outside counsel calls back immediately, and I had another woman who was working with me, and he starts in his very loud, blustery voice, well, ladies, and then he pauses, let me just tell you that I think you're crazy. And not crazy in the term that you might be familiar with, lunatic crazy, but there's another word for crazy. I think you're driven by the cycles of the moon. And, I mean, I was like, that was my reaction. What,
Damn.
But that would have been my reaction if I hadn't had many years to work up to how do you react to that. And I was so calm and collected, and I said, you might want to reserve those comments for the judge. She might appreciate it more than I do, because I knew we drew a woman judge, and I was just waiting for that. So it's simple, but just being able to not get emotionally involved when you encounter someone who is blatantly no respect for women. How do you come back at it and feel good about yourself? And I really felt good about my ability to stay calm and collected and have that response.
That's awesome.
Wow.
So let's talk about how courage manifests itself differently when you're a manager than when you're an individual. Who wants to go first? And who wants to stall so the other person has the right answer?
I'm ready.
All right, goes to.
I'll defer if you want.
No, go.
In one position you can hide, in the other you can't. Right? And I think as an individual, you have a lot of self-regulation, self-assessment, self-motivation, self-governance. And the reality is that you will evaluate your actions based upon your own views, your own perspective of how it affected you or how maybe you thought about it. When you're a manager, you're not evaluated by yourself. You're evaluated by all the people that you lead, and you can't hide from that. And so one of the challenges with courage is, as an individual, you can choose not to do something. As a manager, if you choose not to do something because you lack the courage or conviction or maybe knowledge of a situation, everybody knows that you didn't do it. And so there's a very big difference between being in the spotlight and hiding behind an individual position.
Or being in the United States, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Thanks. Anyone else want to add in?
I mean, I think I'd just say that, at the end of the day, I really view courage in the same light that I view trust and transparency, and those are in a value sense. And so, in that light, I'm not sure there's a big difference, right? As an individual, I have an opportunity to exercise courage. As a manager, the difference, and I would agree with Stu, is that I have the opportunity to exercise it in a perhaps more public way. But ultimately, I have to be judged by me. Right? I have to be able to look at me at the end of the day, and regardless of whether I'm operating as an individual or a manager, and say, how'd I do?
I guess one of the biggest differences I see is what I mentioned earlier, and that is sometimes courage as a leader is allowing someone to do something entirely different from what you would do and stand by them anyway. Mm-hmm. Think about when we take our first leadership positions. It is so easy to drive everyone to do what you would do, and you hold on so tight to each decision. I think there's an element of courage in letting something happen in an uncontrolled way. And if you trust your people, then and it sometimes goes badly, you still stand behind them. That's an interesting act of courage as a leader. Oh my God, I lost my notes, Debbie. That's okay. It's the questions I lost. There are no answers here. You all have the answers. So have you ever drawn a line in the sand at work, and what were the consequences, and would you make the same decision today?
So I had a situation where I was a deputy in an organization working for a gentleman who did not get along with his boss. In fact, I think the boss just really hated him. And there was extreme tension between the two of them on a daily basis. So much so that his boss began to come to me instead of going to him for what was needed for the organization. The worst possible position to be in, I think, as a subordinate manager. Mm-hmm. And I distinctly recall going in to meet with his boss. I was summoned to meet with his boss after Shea, his boss, had pretty publicly, like in front of me, told him he was being relieved of his duties. And at the same time said to me, and by the way, you need to pick him up, your job. So she summoned me into her office to sort of read me the riot act on what I did and didn't need to do with regard to, and you're going to think this is really silly, but it's not really, with regard to what I did and didn't need to do in this new responsibility she'd given me. And there was a point at which I actually felt that that my values were being compromised in that discussion. And I did a really simple thing. I stood up. Now, she told me to sit back down.
Yeah, but you still did it.
And I stood for a couple seconds longer just for effect. But I believe, and later I had a discussion with her about that. And I told her what I didn't like and what I did like. And I think sometimes it takes courage just to hold on to you in the face of what might appear to be not so much a personal attack, but for me, a professional one. It takes courage to hold on to you and to say, so what? So if I never get another promotion, what's happening right now is not right.
You?
I have many. Let's see. The quick one that comes to mind was I had once had to fire my best friend for sexual harassment. It was both the easiest, tough decision I ever made and the toughest, easiest decision I had ever had to make. He violated the rules. I gave him the warning as I was supposed to as his manager. He did it again, and I fired him. We didn't speak for 11 years. And last year he called me, he retired, and he said he was sorry. And so when I look at it, would I do it again? In a heartbeat. It was a reflection on the position. It was a reflection on me. It was a reflection on a set of values that I had. And it was a reflection on how others would evaluate that role. And so it came to me like that, and I did it. I would do it again in a heartbeat.
Awesome. All right, last question of the prepared ones. So some people say, I do, be brave, and if you're not, pretend to be, because no one can tell the difference.
Yeah.
Actually, I stole that quote from someone, I just can't remember who it is. But, after so many years, you get to just take it as your own. Really, I said it here. You all can now use it. So do you guys have any examples of when you pretended to be brave?
And I really love that, because I don't know if more of the time I'm really totally confident or more of the time I'm just pretending to be confident. And I think you have to learn to do both. And I think it's entirely, it's not going to be the case that you are walking into every situation very confident. I think I have a situation I remember, it's awful, it lasted for over a year. But there was a case that I developed, and it was mine. I had really put myself out, even though my supervisor said, if we don't like the way that goes, I don't know, if you should say in the section in so many words, because it was sort of going down a different path. That this is all internet crime and things, so nothing's ever charted the territory. So I spent a lot of time developing this case with the federal law enforcement agency and put a lot of work into it. And then a particular U.S. Attorney's Office got involved, and I was with Maine Justice. And there's always problems back and forth. But I knew, that we would have to work with an office, and this is the office we're going to work with. And, of course, I got someone on the other end who was just ready to take it and run. So, I knew it would be a little bit of a battle. So every single week I got on a plane and showed up at the doorway to work on the case with this particular person, and he made it so clear that that he had it. He didn't want me involved, and I get off. I would get to his office. I would wait outside because I didn't have a key card to get in, and whenever he got around to it, he would open up the door, and I just kept showing up every week with a smile on my face, ready to go, and I just had to hold fast. And my husband was backing me. It reminds me of my mom telling me when I was 6 years old and walking off the soccer field, crying, head down, put the head up, put a smile on, and pretend you're confident. And it worked. I mean, it was a battle, but I just steadfast, and over time was absolutely a co-equal, and if not a co-equal. He knew I wasn't going away. He knew he had to work with me, but I was like shaking all the time. It was uncomfortable. And I really did not have much courage at the time, or confidence. So that's one example, just sort of held in there even though I wasn't confident.
Yeah. Debbie?
Wow. So
I know.
pretend
having
to
to
be
follow
brave.
Kim.
I know, just hard. So, I guess as a woman, and especially in the senior executive ranks in the intelligence community, there aren't a whole lot of us. And so there have been so many times throughout my career where I had to walk into an environment and I had to self-talk, right? Like at the door, I tell myself, I belong. I belong here. I'm supposed to be in this room. And even in the midst of, you all know how this works, right? Where the meeting had already happened in the men's room. And you get there and the decisions had already sort of been made, but they pretend as if you really are a part of the meeting. And so some of the courage is in being able to say, so when did that happen? Or I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
And then there's sort of silence for a minute, and then we have to kind of go through the process of making the decision again. So I think, in any given day, I have an opportunity to, I don't know if I like the pretend to be brave. I am brave. I believe I am brave. But I do have to draw on deep sometimes those resources to self-talk, to say I belong. I belong here. I'm here. I belong here, and I've got a job to do.
Stu, do you have anything to add?
September 11, 2001, had breakfast meeting at 9 a.m. at Windows on the World at the top of the World Trade Center. Had to cancel it at the last minute to fly to Boston's Logan Airport. Took off out of Washington Dulles Airport at 7:30, same time as a terrorist. Flew over the top of the World Trade Center where my brother was working, landed in Boston's Logan Airport. 20 minutes after I landed, the first plane hit. I was in my office with 400 or 500 people, and I had another 2,000 back at the main headquarters, and my job as a senior manager was to keep everybody calm, to worry about continuity operations, to get people home, to make sure people were safe, to get all the employees that were on travel back to their locations. And meanwhile, I had no idea what was going on with my family. I had no idea what was going on with my brother, and obviously had no idea what was going on in the world. And I was scared to death internally, but my job was to keep everybody else calm. And so I did. I put on a wonderful facade. Inside, my stomach was going around in circles. And then after I figured out that everybody else was okay and got things moving, I finally got to catch up and find out that my brother was okay, my family was okay. But it was a very uncomfortable position to show that courage, if you will, when I didn't really have it.
For me, it's about every time I get a new job. I don't think I've ever taken a job that I thought I knew how to do. Right? Actually, on this last job, I told my boss, I said, just once, could you give me one that built on what I think I've done in the past? For me, it's about just remembering that I've done it before, and that the empiricist in me tells me that it's going to work out okay because it's worked out in the past. And I think there's a lot of commonality in what we all said, and that is, and it's a little bit about what Debbie says, it's not really pretending, it's remembering that we've done it before and then taking that step anyway. And then finding out that you actually do have that reserve to draw on. So I think that's one of, to me, the most interesting things about this attribute when you combine it with leadership, because you're impelled by more than just your own strength or weakness. You draw on that and then you use it for the responsibility that you have. And it manifests itself in a lot of different ways. So we have a couple more minutes. We talked about courage. That was my favorite leadership attribute. I'd like to ask this distinguished panel, if you had been setting up this, what would you have chosen as your favorite leadership attribute?
Oh.
Besides, we couldn't have possibly done it any better than this. But yes, ma'am.
I think from a woman perspective, leadership attribute in taking the knowledge you gain about the difficulties of the situations you're going to face as a woman and mentoring that back into women to help them along the way and maybe not have some of the same experiences that you have or know how to approach the situations that you have, and sharing that knowledge. And I think that even, we talk a lot about sponsors. I've had probably more men sponsors than women sponsors, but the one thing I always wished I had more of was women leaders telling me, you're going to face these situations and this is how you can respond to them. Because as I've mentored women, I hear the same, they'll come to me and they'll say, this happened to me 3 weeks ago. I'm like, why didn't you tell someone? That is, in your heart and your gut, that is not right, that he should have not done that to you. That was a really inappropriate thing to happen. you thought about it for several weeks, then you approached it. And I did that early on too. So just sort of sharing that knowledge back to the community as women work their way up. This is what you're going to face, and this is how you can get to point B faster and not sort of experience it as I did.
Same way.
Yeah.
Cool. Stu?
You know, in life I'd call it love, and in business I'd call it passion. You know, you were talking last night about your son and the love you have for your son and his errant ways, and it's really interesting when you're a parent. When you're a parent and you love your children, there is nothing that would stop you. You have zero fear, right? So why is it that people are afraid to do something, take a risk, right? I mean, it's almost the antithesis of courage. And if you think about it, if you have passion in business and you really want to do something, as we talk, we all live this mission. This is what we do, right? We have so much passion for it. We wake up every single day. All of you have that same passion. So don't have fear in terms of letting it get in the way of you accomplishing what you're passionate about. So what if you don't have all the skills? So what if you don't check all the boxes, right? So what? If you have passion, go for it. Don't have the fear of failure, but don't also have the fear of trying, right? Once you get rid of that fear, it's amazing what you can accomplish.
Are you ready now?
Sure, thanks for that extra time. I appreciate it.
We're just trying to help you out there.
I'm here for you, you know. It's a friendly moderator.
So I think I would say integrity. You know, being a woman or a man of your word, saying what you mean and meaning what you say. And day in and day out, we all have to deliver bad news, make tough decisions, struggle with people and people issues. But my experience has been, you will be valued and respected for being a person of your word. And people know you as that and will respect you even if they don't agree with you. So I think integrity would be a place I'd focus.
Awesome. So good job.